An alien mantis watched me sleep. It was almost definitely some sort of praying mantis-like creature. Not the cute, happy Frenchwoman kind of mantis like in the Marvel movies. This was some sort of insectoid. I worried for years that I was crazy, but then I found out that others have seen these creatures as well. And even though some say they have bad intentions, I'm just relieved to hear that I'm not alone. I really feel weird writing this. I am a sensible 59-year-old woman. However, my daughter, who is grounded in all things she can see and touch, would tell you I have one of the most open minds she's ever run across. I do have more of a willingness to approach things with an open mind because of my own experiences. Well, here goes. I had an experience in 1993 that has bothered me for 23 years. My husband was involved, but didn't see anything, even though he was in the bed next to me. The only person I told was my personal physician the very next day. At the time, we lived in a 2-story house on a dead-end cul-de-sac in Seattle, Washington, about 5 miles from the SeaTac airport. It was sometime in late October or early November of 1993. It occurred in the middle of the night, about 2 a.m. My husband and I were asleep. I was on the side of the bed facing the outer bedroom wall, and my husband was asleep next to me. I woke up and rolled over, bringing the bedroom doorway into my view. The hall light was on outside the bedroom, so I had a clear view of the doorway. I saw something standing in the bedroom doorway. It was very tall, and I got the vague outline of some kind of robe-like clothing. I sat straight up in bed, grabbed my husband's arm, and shook him while shouting, "There's something in the doorway!" My husband bolted up out of bed and grabbed the baseball bat he kept next to the headboard. But as soon as I had shouted out, the thing was gone. Just gone. I was nearly hysterical, and it took a while for my husband to calm me down. I told him I had seen something in the doorway. He checked the house, but of course there was nothing there. Everything was locked up tight. I felt like I was losing my mind. I apologized for scaring him like that and waking him up by yelling. I don't really remember anything about the rest of that night, except that I was very upset and couldn't get back to sleep. I was very, very scared. I knew I had seen something. I didn't trust that it wouldn't come back if I went back to sleep. The next morning, I phoned my doctor and left a message asking him to phone me back. I told him in the message that I thought there was something really wrong with me. When he phoned me back, I broke down in tears, telling him that I felt like I was losing my mind. I told him that I know I saw something in my bedroom doorway in the middle of the night. It was real. I had seen it, but it wasn't possible that anything was there. He asked me what I had seen, and I told him it was a thing, or a man, or something. He said that if a person is under stress, it was possible to be dreaming while you're waking up and think that you're seeing something. I was under stress, as we had started our business earlier that year. He prescribed some medication for my nerves and told me I should try to forget that it had happened. I was left with this feeling that I didn't really know what I had seen. It had happened so fast. I tried to forget that it happened, but of course I never could. A few months later, I sat down at the table with pencil and paper. I tried to go back to that moment when I saw the thing in the doorway. I just kind of let my mind float and drew what I had seen. What I ended up with was bizarre. It frightened me so badly, I just threw the drawing away and tried to forget about it. I had drawn an insect-like head with big, big eyes, a kind of robe outline, and these insect-like arms with hands coming out of slits on the side of the robe. I can still close my eyes and see that thing in the doorway. Some details really stuck out at me, but others are so vague it's impossible to really describe them. I remember in detail 2 nub-like things on its head, but have only the vaguest sense of stalks or antennae coming out of them. And I remember the way the arms looked, but can't really remember what the hands looked like, or what they were doing. I remember the eyes, but only remember an impression of 2 slits where a nose would have been. And I don't remember a mouth. I have only the vaguest sense of a robe or flowing cloth of sorts, but I remember the slits where the arms came out of it. Over the years, I've tried to convince myself that, because of the vagueness of some of the details, it must not have been real. But it still bothers me to this day, and I'm still sure I saw something. I have never had the nerve or desire to tell anyone else about the experience, and I don't want anyone to think I'm unstable. Even if I had wanted to tell someone about it, who would I tell? What good would it do? But I read that some people have described an insect or praying mantis-like being that they have seen. I hadn't heard about that before. It sent a volt of electricity through my body, like an adrenaline rush, and I got butterflies in my stomach. Everyone knows about alien greys, thanks to the movies. I've never seen one, and never want to, but if other people have seen the big insect thing, maybe there really was something in my doorway that night. If other people have seen this thing, maybe they'll feel better if they know I saw it too, even if only for a few seconds. I'm glad I finally got to tell someone about this. This was posted 7 years ago in a subreddit called Humanoidencounters. Unlike subs such as No Sleep, there's no expectation that what you're reading is fiction. This original poster means every word she writes. Insectoid sightings are so common on that sub, they've essentially become their own subtopic. These humanoids are usually compared to a praying mantis, and they're almost always wearing clothes, which is good. If our planet's going to be taken over by alien bug creatures, my only request is that they dress modestly. While users on this sub believe in alien life, one commenter did suggest that OP might have just been suffering from sleep paralysis. But don't think they were implying there's no supernatural element here. That same commenter goes on to say that sleep paralysis is often haunted by a shadowy figure wearing a top hat. What do you think? Was this OP simply under stress, or do you believe that the truth really may be out there? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. A lady ran over my dog, so I terminated her pregnancy. I was a kid when I adopted a street pup. Everyone in our neighborhood loved it, except for one pregnant lady. So one day, I was playing cricket when we all heard a whimpering sound, followed by a thud sound. I thought something bad happened and ran to check on my pup, and my fear became a reality. The lady was saying that she didn't see any pup while driving, but every other kid was sure she did it on purpose. So that's when I made a plan to hurt her in the same way. When Holi came around, which is a Hindu color festival in India, children were playing with water balloons, as is usually expected. So I threw a balloon filled with color instead of water onto the pregnant lady's face. My friends joined me and threw water on her, making her lose control and trip hard on the cement road. Now, as children, we didn't realize what we did. We thought that we just threw color into her eyes and ran away. But she had to abort her baby as she fell right on her stomach. When confronted by parents and other adults, we all said she was lying and that we didn't throw any color at her. We all lied together, and to this day nobody in our neighborhood discusses it, and that lady still hates us. Some have questioned this story based on the fact that OP uses the word abort when this was more likely a miscarriage. But since English doesn't seem to be their native language, that's a pretty forgivable mistake. What's less forgivable is the fact that, at the time of writing, this story about a kid taking a baby's life has 137 upvotes. There are definitely several stories calling OP a monster and saying he belongs in jail, but the vote count really seems to underscore just how much Reddit hates children. For context, this was a comment on an AskReddit thread about the worst thing you've ever done that you don't regret. So not only did OP ruin a pregnancy over an incident that easily could have been an accident on the woman's part, but he doesn't even feel remorse for it. Needless to say, that whole thread gets pretty dark in places. For instance, there's also a story about a bunch of guys conspiring to take their own brother's life and getting away with it. But that one wasn't really interesting enough to put here. If you made it this far in the video, consider liking and subscribing for more videos coming. Was my friend taken by the Shadow Man? I once ghosted a guy who was supposed to be my friend. The friendship had started off fine, and we became close very quickly. But then the cracks started yawning into a weird black abyss. His stories didn't match up to reality. He always had a new story to tell, and it was always fantastical. He would call me at 3 a.m. and just sob about how his bones hurt, and he couldn't see the Shadow Man. I was 19 and very confused, very afraid. I couldn't deal with it, and I didn't feel safe. And he never listened if I tried to help him through whatever was going on with him. So I just stopped picking up the phone. I stopped agreeing to meet with him. I disappeared from his life. A year later, a mutual friend and an ex of mine told me he had passed away of bone cancer. I was freaking devastated. It traumatized me for years, thinking that he needed me and I ditched him, and he passed alone. It crumbled how I navigate boundaries now, to this very day. 5 years after that, I was told that it was all a lie, and that he never had cancer. Or he had it and was in a coma, or he moved away. I don't know the truth. But I do know that cutting those two liars out of my life was the right choice to make. After that first story, I just want to know if the Shadow Man was wearing a top hat. Maybe he's not in a coma at all. Maybe it's just the longest known case of sleep paralysis. I know I shouldn't joke, as it doesn't seem that this story is untrue. It's from the very same AskReddit thread as the story above. But this story is just such an emotional roller coaster. It starts off unnerving, gets significantly worse, and then ends with a dual sense of mystery and calm. It's good that the liars are gone, but what happened to the friend? The important thing to note here is that even if the friend did pass away, that doesn't mean OP should feel guilty. A teenager doesn't know how to deal with behavior that erratic. There were presumably adults in this guy's life who should have been helping him. Even if he didn't have a terminal illness, there was clearly something very wrong with him. One commenter says shadow men are a symptom of meth use. Either way, it's not a 19-year-old's job to work out what's going on and give him the help he needs. Hopefully he disappeared because he went somewhere he could be taken care of. I dropped a monster brownie in front of all my coworkers. I used to work in an office in the Midwestern United States that shared a campus with a factory. The bathrooms in the office were factory style, meaning they were very large with many stalls, urinals, and an attached locker room. One day, a while after lunch, I went into the men's room for my afternoon constitutional. Moments after I was seated, the tornado alarm went off. Within seconds, the men's room was filled with every person in my office, as the men's room was the designated tornado shelter. I sat there paralyzed for a few minutes, sweat on my brow, my pants around my ankles, a torpedo loaded in the tube, and suddenly surrounded by a few hundred coworkers. I realized that no one knew who was in the assorted stalls. With that realization, I unleashed a monster grumpy. The kind that stinks up entire houses. I could hear my colleagues around me groaning and gasping in disgust. Some of them sounded like they were choking back their lunch. One of them called out for Jesus. I knew they were packed in shoulder to shoulder, but I had plenty of room to myself. When I finished, I didn't flush, knowing that would give me away as the source. I let them all stew in my stink for what seemed like forever. People coughed, gasped, and swore. Finally, the all clear was sounded, and everyone flooded out into the halls. I waited just a moment and flushed. When I exited the stall, the bathroom was empty. I washed my hands and returned to work as if nothing had happened. The next day, the consensus amongst the team on the floor was that our coworker Daryl was the likely culprit of the stinkening. I kept my mouth shut, and years later, when Daryl retired, people were still talking about the time he took a dump during a tornado and made us all smell it. Daryl was a lazy piece of trash. I regret nothing, and I'd do it again if given the chance. Look, I know I said we were doing more horror stories for October, but don't you dare tell me this one doesn't belong here. The greatest types of horror stories are always the ones that could happen to you. Even if your workplace bathroom isn't used as a tornado shelter, you never know what kind of emergency might result in you being trapped in there with somebody else. And if you're stuck in the bathroom anyway, it stands to reason that somebody might try to take advantage of their surroundings. Or maybe it's scarier to think of being put in Daryl's shoes. Unless you are especially charismatic, it's unlikely that all of your coworkers like you. Imagine someone disliking you so much, they threw you under the bus for their burrito bombs. You'd spend years until retirement failing to live down your stinky reputation. I guess it's still worth it as long as you get a cake on your last day. But it's still an unfortunate ordeal to go through just for a slice of red velvet. My wife strangled me in my sleep. Last night, after drinking, my partner woke me up in the middle of the night by choking me. She had my arms pinned down by her knees and held both hands around my throat. She was seriously squeezing hard. I had to free my arms and loosen her grip to breathe. She tried again later with a pillow and with a headlock. She asked me if I wanted to be murdered. I said no. She said, "Well, too bad. Don't fall asleep." She has also threatened me with a knife before, thrown sharp objects that hit my eye and face, and cut my skin with her nails. She hits me all the time in the face and the groin. I've been bruised all over. I never know when to expect it because she usually acts normal until she does these things. I never fight back or resist because I'm scared she'll use it against me. Even when I try to record video evidence of her behavior, she stops and pretends like she's been hurt. What do I do? We have a kid together, and the situation is only escalating. I called her parents a couple of years ago after the knife incident. They told me to be more careful and not to make her angry. Every time she hurts me, it's always my fault for making her angry. But after hurting me, she tends to be very loving and affectionate. It hurts my brain. I tried telling my own mom and grandma. They want me to put up with it for the sake of the kid. No one cares what's happening to me, and I feel so alone. I don't feel safe. I still like the good side of her, and I want her to get better, but she's only getting worse. I'm just going to come right out and say it. I believe this was posted in bad faith. I get that people tend to think women are always the victims in domestic cases, but I don't buy that both spouses' parents are telling this man to just grin and bear it, or that it's his fault. At least one person should be telling him to take the kid and get out. If his wife is this unhinged, there's no telling when she might start targeting the kid as well. In a real story, you'd expect at least one of the kid's grandparents to be concerned about that. On the off chance this does turn out to be real, I really hope OP does right by the kid. And in this case, that means getting out of there and into a safe environment. It's not just about the marriage anymore. There's a child at risk who deserves to live in a stable home. Anyone who thinks that kids only care about whether their parents are together simply doesn't know kids that well. Please leave your stories in the comments. I'd love to make a video of them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.